What happens inside an empath after being hurt repeatedly? Nobody talks about this part. Not the inspirational quotes. Not the fake healing journey posts. Not the smiling photos after emotional destruction. Nobody talks about what actually happens inside an empath when they give their soul to people who only knew how to take. Because the truth is, an empath doesn't break loudly. They break invisibly. And if you've ever laid awake at 3 a.m. replaying conversations, trying to figure out how someone who claimed to love you could slowly become emotionally cold, this message is for you. If you've ever apologized for things that weren't your fault, if you've ever stayed soft with someone who kept turning your heart into a battlefield, if you've ever felt guilty for finally becoming distant after being emotionally abandoned over and over again, then you know exactly what I'm about to say. An empath doesn't stop loving because they want to. They stop loving because their nervous system. M finally realizes survival matters more than attachment. And the terrifying part? Most people never notice the moment an empath dies emotionally, because by the time the empath goes silent, they already screamed inside themselves 1,000 times. That silence, that numbness, that emotional shutdown, it didn't happen overnight. It happened after being misunderstood too many times, after begging for honesty, after carrying relationships alone, after being treated like they were too sensitive simply because they noticed every emotional inconsistency. And eventually, something changes inside them forever. Not because they wanted revenge, not because they became heartless, but because repeated pain rewires even the purest nervous system. And tonight, you're going to understand what truly happens inside an empath after being hurt repeatedly. Not the version people post online, the real version, the dark version, the version nobody saw, the first thing repeated emotionally. Pain does to an empath is it destroys their trust in their own intuition. And this is the cruelest part, because intuition was always their superpower. Empaths notice energy before words. They notice emotional shifts before behavior changes. They can feel distance before abandonment even arrives. But toxic people know this, so they slowly teach the empath to distrust what they feel. You're overthinking. You're imagining things. You're too emotional. You always make problems out of nothing. And little by little, the empath starts disconnecting from their internal alarm system. That's how emotional manipulation works. Not through one massive betrayal, but through consistent psychological erosion. A toxic relationship doesn't just wound an empath emotionally, it confuses them neurologically, because now their body feels danger while their mind tries to rationalize the person causing it, so they stay, even while anxiety grows in their chest, even while sleep disappears, even while their personality slowly dissolves trying to maintain peace. And what people don't understand is, empaths don't stay because they're weak. They stay because they can see wounded humanity inside broken people. They don't fall in love with behavior. They fall in love with potential. And sometimes that becomes their greatest self-destruction. Because while everyone else sees red flags, the empath sees pain to heal. While everyone else walks away, the empath stays longer hoping love can repair what accountability never fixed. But eventually, the empath begins losing themselves. Not dramatically, quietly. They stop expressing needs because it starts arguments. They stop speaking truth because it causes emotional withdrawal. They start monitoring tones, moods, body language, facial expressions, trying to prevent emotional explosions before they happen. And without realizing it, they become emotionally hypervigilant. This is where the damage gets deep, because now the empath isn't living anymore. They're scanning. Scanning for rejection. Scanning for distance. Scanning for changes in energy. Scanning for proof they're still loved. And when a human being lives in emotional survival mode long enough, their body starts treating love like danger. That's why hurt empaths become exhausted around people. Not because they hate connection, because their nervous system no longer feels safe inside it. And nobody sees this battle. People only see the empath becoming different, more distant, more quiet, more guarded. But they don't understand the empath didn't become cold. They became tired of bleeding for people who called them dramatic while benefiting from their emotional labor. There's a specific kind of loneliness empaths experience that most people will never understand. It's the loneliness of being deeply emotionally available, surrounded by emotionally unavailable people. And that loneliness changes you, because eventually that Empath realizes something devastating. The same heart that made them beautiful also made them a target. And once that realization sinks in, something dangerous begins happening inside them. They stop chasing. They stop explaining. They stop begging people to care. Not because they no longer feel, but because repeated disappointment finally teaches them. You cannot force emotional depth into people committed to emotional avoidance. And this is the moment people misread completely. Because when an empath finally detaches, it looks calm from the outside. But internally, it feels like attending the funeral of the person they used to be. They grieve harder than anyone realizes, not just the relationship, the version of themselves that kept believing, the version that kept forgiving, the version that thought love alone could save people. And when that version dies, the empath changes permanently. They become more observant, more private, more selective with energy. They stop pouring oceans into cups that never appreciated water. But here's what nobody tells you. This transformation hurts the empath too, because empaths never wanted to become guarded. They wanted safety. They wanted reciprocity. They wanted someone to hold their heart with the same care they gave everyone else. But repeated emotional betrayal teaches the nervous system a brutal lesson. Being open without boundaries becomes self-harm. So the empath starts rebuilding differently. And at first, it feels unnatural. Saying no feels selfish. Pulling away feels cruel. Choosing peace over attachment feels lonely. But slowly, they begin realizing something life-changing. Their empathy was never the problem. Their lack of boundaries was. That changes everything. Because now the empath starts recognizing patterns they ignored before. They notice how certain people only call when they need emotional rescue. How some people confuse access with entitlement. How others feed off emotional validation while giving nothing in return. And for the first time in their life, the empath stops romanticizing emotional suffering. They stop trying to earn love through sacrifice. And this is where the rebirth begins, quietly, not with revenge, not with arrogance, but with awareness. The empath finally understands. Their softness was sacred, and sacred things require protection. This is the second thing repeated pain does to an empath. It forces them to discover the difference between compassion and self-abandonment. Most empaths were conditioned early in life to become emotional caretakers. Maybe they grew up in chaos. Maybe they had emotionally inconsistent parents. Maybe love only arrived when they performed emotionally for others. So they learned something dangerous. If I can keep everyone okay, maybe I'll finally feel safe too. That conditioning follows them into adulthood. That's why empaths overgive, over-explain, over-forgive, because somewhere deep, they associate being needed with being loved. And toxic people instinctively recognize this. They sense the empath's tolerance, their patience, their ability to absorb pain while still staying loyal. So they push boundaries slowly, and the empath adapts repeatedly, until one day, they don't recognize themselves anymore. They used to laugh freely. Now they analyze every text message. They used to feel emotionally alive. Now they feel emotionally numb. They used to trust openly. Now they question every interaction. And the scariest part? Most empaths blame themselves for this transformation. They think, maybe I became difficult. Maybe I ask for too much. Maybe I'm impossible to love. Number. What actually happened is prolonged emotional invalidation fractured their sense of emotional safety. That changes brain chemistry. That changes attachment patterns. That changes self-worth. Because humans are not designed to constantly beg for consistency from people who claim to love them. And eventually, the empath reaches emotional burnout. This isn't ordinary sadness. This is soul exhaustion. The kind where responding to messages feels heavy. The kind where social interaction drains the body. The kind where they isolate not because they hate people, but because being emotionally misunderstood became traumatic. And during this stage, something profound happens. The empath starts seeing through everyone, not cynically, clearly. They begin noticing manipulation hidden beneath charm, performative affection hidden beneath inconsistency, false intimacy hidden beneath convenience. Because pain sharpened their perception. And ironically, the same wounds that nearly destroyed them begin awakening them. This is why healed empaths become terrifyingly powerful. Not because they become ruthless. Because they stop betraying themselves to maintain connection. That's the evolution. The empath who once tolerated emotional crumbs now walks away at the F. First sign of disrespect. The empath who once over-explained boundaries now protects their peace without apology. The empath who once chased closure now understands silence reveals more than words ever could. And people notice this shift. Suddenly, the empath seems harder to access, harder to manipulate, harder to emotionally control. But what they're actually witnessing is someone finally returning to themselves. That's what healing really is. Not becoming emotionless, becoming emotionally intelligent enough to stop confusing suffering with love. And yes, there will still be nights where the empath mourns deeply, because empaths remember emotionally. A song can reopen years of grief. A scent can resurrect heartbreak instantly. A silence can bring back abandonment wounds they thought they buried. But now, they no longer drown inside those emotions. They observe them, honor them, release them, because they finally understand something most people never learn. Sensitive it. Why is not weakness? Sensitivity is advanced emotional awareness. And once an empath learns how to combine empathy with boundaries, their entire life changes. Now they stop forcing connection, stop shrinking themselves, stop auditioning for love. They become magnetic naturally because authenticity replaces desperation. And the people who once took advantage of them, they become confused because the empath no longer reacts the same way. No more chasing, no more proving, no more emotional self-sacrifice, only peace, only clarity, only truth. And maybe that's the real ending nobody expects. The repeated pain that almost destroyed the empath becomes the very thing that finally awakens them, not into bitterness, into self-respect, into discernment, into emotional freedom. So if you're listening to this tonight and you've been carrying silent heartbreak nobody fully understands, if you've been questioning your worth because people mishandled your heart, if you've been feeling yourself becoming quieter, more distant, more guarded, please hear this carefully. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming conscious of what your soul can no longer survive. And there is nothing wrong with protecting your peace after years of emotional war. One day, the right people will not punish your sensitivity. They'll value it. They won't make you beg for consistency. They won't weaponize your empathy. They won't drain your spirit while calling it love. And when that day comes, you'll realize something beautiful. You were never too much. You were simply giving your deepest parts to people who lacked the emotional capacity to hold them. If this message found you at the exact moment you needed it, take a breath tonight knowing someone finally said the words you carried silently for years. And if you want more videos that speak to the hidden psychology of empaths, emotional pain, healing, and personal power, subscribe quietly. No pressure. Just know, not alone in this battle anymore. And until next time, protect your heart. But never apologize for having one.